Hello, in this video I want to show you how to play against Tarrasch Variation in French defense as black. After watching this video, you would be able to play a rare line that will definitely surprise your opponents and you will gain lots of points. I believe in this. Let's discover this line together and I will explain you everything in details. And let's start. In this position, after knight e2, the classical line is c5, very well known. But I'm coming with the idea of bishop e7, Tarrasch variation, because Tarrasch was the first top player who started to play this line on the big level. White have several moves that are really good. Knight goes to f3, bishop goes to d3, and e5. Those lines are main, and let's discover them step by step. I want to start with the line knight goes to f3 because first of all is the most popular in the main, and secondly it shows up some ideas of black. Why we push the bishop on e7? We're delaying the knight on f6, and in compared to the classical lines when we are playing the knight to f6 on the move 3, now white push the knight to f3. They can't do the f4. So in the position after knight f6, e5, knight goes to d7, it's no longer any f4 ideas for white. That makes us satisfied. So let's imagine white's doing the main line in the most logical way of Tarrasch players for white. Bishop d3, c5, c3, knight goes to c6, castle short. This position is quite famous and popular. And here black has two interesting approaches. The first one is the main, according to the theory and dynamical approach with g5. That's, I think, also interesting. And second one is positional approach with the a5. Both of them are playable. Let's go to both of them. So if you want to play active and aggressive, you can test g5 here. Basically, here on the way, the main for white is to take on c5, g4, knight goes to d4. This line goes pretty forced. So knight takes, bishop goes to b5, because the bishop was under attack. Bishop d7, knight b3, h5. Yeah, this position looks really unbalanced, and you better to have an experience in some blitz games to be able to play this. So the line could be like this. Let's imagine rook goes to e1, knight goes to g6, takes, bishop d3. And in this position, black even can crazy castle. That's basically a theoretical novelty, I think. And the idea is to receive the position like this. Bishop g6, we are not afraid, by the way. After f takes g6, we are having an f line to counter. So bishop h6, f5, takes, crazy position with compensation for black. You can test this line on practice, and you will see what happens after this. After g5, I need to admit that white have an interesting idea that rarely happened on the chessboard. And the idea is to go surprisingly knight b1. Yeah, that looks crazy. But the idea that the pawn on g5 starts to be under attack. And white, in case of c takes, wants to replace the knight. And also they want to push the bishop to e3 currently to support the center. Because the g5 move is still the idea to play g4 to knock to the center. So g4, knight goes to e1, the pawn is hanging. And after h5, white could play bishop e3 with some ideas of f4, f5 in the future. This position looks a bit dangerous for black. So if you want to come out with g5, okay, not all of your opponents will be able to play knight b1, but you still need to gain an experience. That's really very complicated line. It's better to have it. I prefer as black to play here a5. More calm line that I really like to do. What is the idea, you may ask? For example, after logical rook e1, yes, by the way, if you will do something like a4, here I'm completely satisfied because after takes, my knight can receive the b4 square. And after like bishop b1, for example, I have b6, which bishop comes to a6, and my bishop would be active. So all French lovers would appreciate this position. Returning back after a5, the main steal for white is to have rook e1. Rook e1 is a typical for this line. I want to make the knight f1, knight g3, knight h5 possible and unlock my bishop. So, and also the rook supports the center in general. That looks very logical. And now the black's idea is to take, and play here a4. By the way, g5 in this position is not the best solution because we already did this takes and a5 looks weirdly in compared to the previous line. So if you want to play g5, better to do this on the move before. So a4. The idea of this line now that, for example, after like knight f1, that is still one of the most popular approaches here. We want to go knight b6. We are looking for some a3, knight b4, knight c4, bishop d7. We're trying to do the counter on the queen sides. The line could be like this: knight g3, h5, knight e2. Yeah, it's very important not to let white to play knight h5, I believe. So h5 is the program move. Knight e2, knight b4, bishop b1, bishop d7. I want to put my bishop to b5 to be active, and after a3 I can do knight c6. My knight could come to c4, the other knight could be transposed to b3. Unbalanced position, you can test it with black. The strongest approach for white, as it was underlined by my arrows here, is to go knight b1. So this idea is still the main, to put the knight to c3. The line could be like this: knight c3, bishop d7, a3, for example, knight a5. Yeah, and I'm still doing my counter. Like after knight d2, I can place few moves. I can do, for example, rook c8. And yeah, still this position is very complicated. White can count on some advantage after rook f3 with the rook g3, but you can play as at black. I don't think that your opponent will find knight b1, knight c3, honestly. It's a very tough idea. Other way, you definitely will receive a nice position. So at least it's interesting, and I welcome you to the discussion. Take my ideas and analyze them deeply and add this to your report here as well. So that was the main line with knight goes to e3. Right, returning back to the move 3. The other move, also kind of a main one, is to go bishop d3. The idea that white's trying to hide this knight f3 move, to be able after knight f6 to play e5, knight fd7, and transpose this to the main line of the third move, knight f6. But we are also tricky, and we goes with the c5. So our idea now is to force something in the center. So if c3, for example, all the time we can just take, play knight c6, then we will take on e4, right? That would be equal position. After takes, knight f6. Nothing to discuss. White can be in troubles because of the isolated d4 pawn even. So that's why the main move is to take on c5 in this position. Knight goes to f6. Tricky idea. What's the point? If he goes knight f3 immediately, then I can easy do equal position. To trade everything here, trade here, and play bishop c5. This position, to be honest, is equal. That's why after move 5, knight f6, whites regularly prefer to play queen e2. So castle looks logical, knight goes to e3. And here the best move for black is to play a5. The idea is to prevent b2, b4, to protect the pawn on c5, and we want to let us do knight e6, knight takes c5, to make our knight able to play from that side. So let's see how it was. Castle, knight goes to e6. And white has two approaches, to close with e5 or to take. To take, I think after takes, I will just took on c5, play bishop g4, that would be a nice position. If white tries to go knight b3, I have a4. And like such position like this, for example, even a3, if takes, I can even firstly play rook e8. That looks very interesting and sharp to play for both colors. So the main line after knight e6 is to play e5 in this position. Knight goes to d7, c3. Because now I wanted to take, and this bishop would be trapped. By the way, c4 is not that dangerous for us. Here we can go knight d takes c5. The idea is that we also can go knight b4. And after bishop b1, d4, like rook d1, d3, queen f1, queen c7. This line is interesting for black. I really love the pawn on d3. And I really ready even to sacrifice it in some moment to have after b6, bishop b7, the compensation. So returning back, c3 is still the main. Takes on c5, bishop c2. And black have a nice choice. Interesting move, b5 in this position. By the way, you can't go queen takes b5 because I will do bishop e6. It's an x-ray to the rook on f1. And we want to play b4 in this position, right? So b5 with the idea of b4 looks interesting. It could be b6 in this situation. So the position can be like this: queen, bishop a6, queen f3, f6. And that's a very sharp line after b4. So the idea is that the black is ready to sacrifice, takes. The line is forced basically. Takes, check on f2 now. We will take, take, queen f6, knight f3 to protect the pawn c3 with queen and rook c8. Yeah, white's having a pair of bishops, but still that's interesting and playable for black. And if you want to switch for something else, I will remind you that after bishop c2 you have b5, you have b6, you have a4, also interesting move. So this position is playable and you can test it. That's all about the line bishop d3 that I need to admit here, and we can move to the e5, the other line. The line after e5 basically is completely not dangerous. It looks like advanced variation, but we included those moves. It's a big question which move is worst, knight on d2 on the bishop on e7. White maybe wants to play c3, f4, but we are immediately comes with a typical c5, right? Now on something like c3, we can just, like for example, take and play queen b6. And we want to go bishop d7, bishop b5, the typical idea for advanced French. Then knight goes to c6, knight h6, knight f5. So French lovers knows this position very well. That's why it's not that dangerous. And the main move is still queen goes to g4 to attack the pawn on g7, trying to use that the bishop comes to e7 pretty early. But we have king f8. And our idea, yes, we lost the castle, but we have h5, g6, king, g7 stuff, or something like this. Let's see. For example, if knight goes to e3, okay, h5, queen g3, h4, queen g4, knight h6. Then I will transpose my knight to f5, g6, king, g7. Black's really good here. So the main line for white here is to take on c5 still. Now we can do knight c6. Typical, we are counterattacking the pawn on e5. Knight f3, h5. And what to do now? Maybe the best way is to remove the queen to the queen side, but most of the times white goes with queen f4. We can go g5. Yeah, this position starts to be a bit crazy. That's a sharp variation in general. Queen f3, we can move up, for example, here, up. Yeah, the test line could be like this. f5. Now on e takes, we can go knight takes. So queen e2 and queen d5. Yeah, this position looks at least interesting for us. So that's honestly all you need to know about e5. And according to my practice, e5 appears very, very rare. So I don't believe that that would be a trouble for you. So in general, in this video, we covered all lines we need. Bishop d3, knight f3, and e5. And you can definitely play this variation. You can use my ideas to discover it deeper and deeper. And I hope you enjoyed this. I want to make a series of video about French defense for black. Please subscribe to my channel, comment this video, press like, and we will see each other on new episodes on my channel. Bye bye.